But when you take a black man and you put him on death row a year before his trial and exclude black people from serving on his jury, when you base your conviction on the coerced testimony of a white felon and ignore the testimony of 24 law-abiding black witnesses, when any evidence proving his innocence is suppressed and anyone who tries to tell the truth is threatened, this case becomes more than the trial of just a single defendant. It becomes a test of whether we're going to be governed by fear and by anger or by the rule of law. The charges against them have been proven to be a false construction of desperate people, fueled by bigotry and bias, and that's not the law. That's not justice.
Injustices have been around since the colonial era. Racial disparities are unfortunately deeply rooted in our nation's history because of oppression and discriminatory decision-making.
And private citizens knowing that either a threat of a call to the police or an actual call to the police can result in them being able to impose, to exclude or have arrested Black and brown folks who are in the community.
% of Blacks and Latinos that are incarcerated are convicted without a full trial.
This violent interaction between Black men and women and police officers plays out in cities and towns across the United States, often with much more devastating results. According to the most recent statistics, Blacks are 3 times more likely to be shot and killed by police than whites.
If African Americans and Latinos were incarcerated at the same rate as whites, then populations of prisons and jails would drop by 40%.
Full conviction lawsuit announced against Delaware County after 16-year-old executed in 1930. An all-white jury convicted Williams after just 4 hours of deliberation. Moreover, they based the conviction on 3 coerced confessions that didn't match the crime scene. This despite a lack of physical evidence connecting him to the crime.
The criminal justice system is really violating our values as a people.
About 140,000 people in the United States who are serving life without parole sentences.
There are tremendous racial disparities in our criminal justice system. The statistics are really startling. In 1954, there were about 100,000 African American men in America's prisons and jails, and today there are almost 900,000. Today, 1 in 3 African American men can expect to go to prison sometime in his lifetime. 1 in 6 Latino males as compared to 1 in 17 white males. So the statistics are stark.
Latino and Black population is only 30% of the U.S. total population. However, they make up 51% of the jail and prison populations. Of Blacks and 35% of Asians or Latinos have felt targeted because of their race. Minority parties such as Blacks and Latinos use drugs just as much as whites. However, they make up 1 in every 3 arrests for drug use. The minority parties also suffer deadly police violence at a much higher rate. Blacks are under more communal supervision than whites are, and are also more likely to have unfair trials and have discriminations put against them. Dred Scott versus Sanford, 1856. This case was about Dred Scott, an enslaved person who petitioned the Supreme Court for his freedom because he felt the Bill of Rights was not exercised for Blacks as it was for whites. Heart of Atlanta Motels versus United States, 1964. This story was proving there was not equality for Blacks by addressing discrimination in lodging and public accommodations. Bailey versus Patterson, 1962. This case was fighting against racial segregation on interstate and intrastate transportation, wanting equal seating for all races and ethnicities. Regents of the University of California versus Bakke, 1978. This case ruled that racial quotas for admissions violated the 14th Amendment. Loving versus Virginia, 1967. This case was trying to gain legality for interracial marriages by removing laws that prohibited marriage of different races. Shelley versus Kremer, 1948. This story ruled that racially restricted housing covenants could not be legally enforced. Brown versus the Board of Education, 1954. This case was fighting for equality in schools, saying that blacks did not get equal treatments as whites that they were promised, and that it is unfair to the children and harming their education. Shuda versus U.S. Customs Border. 4 Hispanic women were detained in a grocery store for 40 minutes because they were speaking Spanish in a small town. The working security officer found it suspicious. Batson versus Kentucky, 1986. This case was about the Supreme Court's decision to prohibit prosecutors from removing prospective jurors for reasons based upon race. DEI laws help create equality for all races and ethnic backgrounds. Executive Order 12898 as of February 11, 1994. Federal actions to help lower class and minority groups. Executive Order 13583, August 18, 2011. This order promotes diversity and inclusion in the federal workplace. The Equality Act, which enforces protection from discrimination and protection for mothers and children in minority groups such as Latinos and African Americans. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, Equality Pay Act of 1963, and another Civil Rights Act in 1991 all collectively tried to promote equality for minority groups such as Latinos and African Americans.